Joseph Stiglitz, in your book, The Great Divide, you talk about the causes of the Great Recession. One of those, of course, is bad mortgage loans. What I want to find out from you is how many of those loans were predatory and how many were by folks who were simply trying to get rich?
Overwhelmingly, the problem was caused by predatory lending. In fact, one of the interesting things is a lot of the loans were given to people who already owned their homes, and the bankers came to these people and said, "Oh, your home is a piggy bank. You can buy a car." You know, many of these people were not very well off, and their incomes were going down. That was part of the growing divide in the country. So what happened is they took a loan, and they were told, "Don't worry, housing prices are going to go up forever," and they were sold mortgage products that were meant to explode.
The question is, were they forced to buy, though? Because you had a lot of people who paid their mortgages throughout the crisis and said, you know, you're not helping me. I pay my mortgage every month. That guy was dumb enough to sign his name on the dotted line. He bought a home in the first place, so he can't be that dumb. So it's his own fault. Personal responsibility is where I'm getting at.
I think personal responsibility is important, but you have to understand disproportionately, not all, you know, disproportionately, a lot of the people who ran into the problem were first-time home buyers, elderly people who had struggled but didn't understand finance. And they were told, this is a new world. Here's a new financial product that is better fitted for you. It was a worse financial product designed to explode. If you're talking to a professional, an expert who, you know, you've worked hard, you're a blue collar worker, you're a janitor, you're something like that, and somebody says, I'm an expert in finance, trust me. It's very natural for people to trust their bankers. And that was a mistake. They now know that was a mistake, but at the time they didn't realize that. They thought, you know, they thought there was a lot more trust in our society than we have today. And that was the mistake. They trusted the bankers.
All right, well, someone who else did well during the Great Recession was Warren Buffett. He made some great investments both in GE and Goldman Sachs. And in your book, you point to him as one of the people who is one of the better capitalists out there, who's worried about inequality. That said, he's recently been buying companies with 3G, a private equity concern, both Heinz and Kraft. They've been laying off people at plants. Is he one of the good guys, or is he a rapacious capitalist as bad as the other guys?
I think he has a better conscience than others, but that doesn't mean that some of the companies that he's invested in haven't behaved just like many other firms. You know, many of the firms in the financial industry, and he has a lot of holdings in financial industry, have a lot of opaqueness, a lot of transparency, a lot of complexity, and you have to suspect, why do they have the complexity, the lack of transparency? We know that the banks used lack of transparency to engage in market manipulation, to engage in manipulating LIBOR, insider trading, and that kind of thing.
But do you think he's hypocritical? Yes, he lives in a small house and he drinks cherry Cokes. That said, when a guy's buying plants, laying off workers, it seems like it goes against what you're writing about in The Great Divide.
Well, I think everybody's a complex. Most people are complex. And I think when he says that it is wrong for him to pay lower taxes than his secretary as a percentage of his income, I think he's genuine about that. I think he doesn't fully disclose, doesn't emphasize the fact that he's paying not only a smaller percentage of his income as his reported income, but much of his true income is capital gains, and we only pay taxes when you sell your assets. So his true income, as economists would define it, is much higher, and so the percentage of his taxes relative to his true income is really, really small.
He was also a supporter of President Obama during that campaign. We got a new campaign going on right now. Recently, we heard from Hillary Clinton. I'm not sure about the exact verbiage, but she said something along the lines of, we need to topple the 1%. Tell me how you feel about her as a candidate, and is this the best way to solve the Great Divide?
I think what she's really intends, and I didn't hear that quote, and I don't know the context in which it was given, that we've had a democracy that is too dominated by money, by the 1%. I wrote an article that grew into the book, The Price of Inequality, and then grew into the book, The Great Divide. An article in the Vanity Fair, it was called Of the 1%, For the 1%, and By the 1%. And one of the themes of that article was to say, we've changed. We've become a democracy which is better described by $1, one vote than one person, one vote. Any democracy that is described in that way is a big departure from our fundamental values.
Do you think Hillary Clinton is a hypocrite, along those same lines as we discussed with Warren Buffett, for bringing it up, considering that she's trying to raise $2.5 billion for this campaign and she makes millions and millions from foreign speeches? Is she a hypocrite?
No, no. I mean, I think the reality is that if you're going to have a voice to represent the change in America, you have to get elected. And until you get elected, you're not going to be able to change campaign finance reform and all the other issues that have distorted both our democracy and our economy. So under the current rules of the game, you have no choice. The real test will come, and it's going to be a hard test, after you get elected. Will you campaign for campaign finance reform? Now, President Obama made a great showing that he was getting a very large percentage of his, or a large amount from small donors. But he also got a lot of money from the big donors. And unfortunately, in the last 8 years, things have actually gotten worse. That is to say, but not because of him, but Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, has given the 1%, the corporations, even more influence in our politics. So this is a really critical issue. It explains how we got to the Great Divide to a large extent, and it's one of the worst manifestations of our Great Divide.
Thanks a lot, Joseph Stiglitz.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching The Street.